to Out of the Blue number 498. I am looking at a page off of neardeath.com. I will link to neardeath.com in the description. This is the page off of, this is Howard Storm. This is the second chapter of Howard Storm's story. He says, Now he's already dead and he's in the spirit world now, and he's had a very bad day in the hospital with some sort of abdominal pain that ends up sent him to the hospital, and he's left his body and he's been in pain all day, and then he went into this very scary hell world. So that's chapter 1. Here we are, chapter 2. He says, Now I don't know if I was even in the world, but I did know that I was here. I was real. All my senses worked too painfully well. I didn't know how I had arrived here. There was no direction to follow, even if I had been physically able to move. The agony that I had suffered during the day was nothing compared to what I was feeling now. I knew then that this was the absolute end of my existence, and it was more horrible than anything I could possibly have imagined. Then a most unusual thing happened. I heard very clearly, once again, in my own voice, something that I had learned in nursery Sunday school. It was a little song, Jesus loves me, yes I know, and it kept repeating. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I wanted to believe that. Not having anything left, I wanted to cling to that thought, and I, inside, screamed, Jesus, please save me. That thought was screamed with every ounce of strength and feeling left in me. When I did that, I saw off in the darkness somewhere the tiniest little star. Not knowing what it was, I presumed it must be a comet or meteor because it was moving rapidly. Then I realized it was coming towards me. It was getting very bright rapidly. When the light came near, its radiance spilled over me, and I just rose up, not with my effort. I just lifted up. Then I saw this very plainly. I saw all my wounds, all my tears, all my brokenness melt away, and I became whole in this radiance. What I did was to cry uncontrollably. I was crying not out of sadness, but because I was feeling things I had never felt before in my life. Another thing happened. Suddenly I knew a whole bunch of things. I knew things. I knew that this light, this radiance, knew me. I don't know how to explain to you that I knew it. I don't know how to explain to you that I knew it knew me. I just did. As a matter of fact, I understood that it knew me better than my mother or father did. The luminous entity that embraced me knew me intimately and began to communicate a tremendous sense of knowledge. I knew that he knew everything about me, and I was being unconditionally loved and accepted. The light conveyed to me that it loved me in a way that I can't begin to express. It loved me in a way that I had never known that love could possibly be. He was a concentrated field of energy, radiant in splendor indescribable, except to say goodness and love. This was more loving than one can imagine. I knew that this radiant being was powerful. It was making me feel so good all over. I could feel its light on me, like very gentle hands around me, and I could feel it holding me. But it was loving me with overwhelming power. After what I had been through, to be completely known, accepted, and intensely loved by this being of light surpassed anything I had known or could have imagined. I began to cry, and the tears kept coming and coming, and I and this light, went up and out of there. We started going faster and faster out of the darkness. Embraced by the light, feeling wonderful and crying, I saw off in the distance something that looked like the picture of a galaxy, except that it was larger and there were more stars than I had seen on Earth. There was a great center of brilliance. In the center there was an enormous bright concentration. Outside the center, countless millions of spheres of light were flying about, entering and leaving what was a great beingness at the center. It was off in this distance. It was off in the distance. Then I didn't say it, I thought it. I said, "Put me back." What I meant by telling the light to put me back was to put me back into the pit. I was so ashamed of who I was and what I had been all my life that all I wanted to do was hide in the darkness. I didn't want to go toward the light anymore. I did, yet I didn't. How many times in my life had I denied and scoffed at the reality before me, and how many thousands of times had I used it as a curse? What incredible intellectual arrogance to use the name as an insult. I was afraid to go closer. I was also aware that the incredible intensity of the emanations might disintegrate what I still experienced as my intact physical body. The being who supported me, my friend, was aware of my fear and reluctance and shame. For the first time, he spoke to my mind in a male voice and told me that if I was uncomfortable, we didn't have to go closer. So we stopped where we were, still countless miles away from the great being. For the first time, my friend, and I will refer to him in that context hereafter, said to me, "You belong here." Facing all this splendor made me acutely aware of my lowly condition. My response was, "No, you've made a mistake, put me back." And he said, "We don't make mistakes, you belong." Then he called out in a musical tone to the luminous entities who surrounded the great center. Several came and circled around us. During what follows, some came and went, but normally there were 5 or 6 and sometimes as many as 8 with us. I was still crying. One of the first things these marvelous beings did was to ask, all with thought, quote, "Are you afraid of us?" I told them I wasn't. They said that they could turn their brilliance down and appear as people. I told them to stay as they were. They were the most beautiful, the most ... As an aside, he continues, Howard Storm, as an aside, I'm an artist. There are 3 primary, 3 secondary, and 6 tertiary colors in the visible light spectrum. Here, I was seeing a visible light spectrum with at least 80 new primary colors. I was also seeing this brilliance. It's disappointing for me to describe because I can't. I was seeing colors that I had never seen before. What these beings were showing me was their glory. I wasn't really seeing them. What these beings were showing me was their glory. I wasn't really seeing them. And I was perfectly content. Having come from a world of shapes and forms, I was delighted with this new formless world. These beings were giving me what I needed at that time. To my surprise and also distress, they seemed to be capable of knowing everything I was thinking. I didn't know whether I would be capable of controlling my thoughts and keeping anything secret. We began to engage in thought exchange, conversation that was very natural, very easy and casual. I heard their voices clearly and individually. They each had a distinct personality with a voice, but they spoke direct to my mind, not to my ears, and they used normal colloquial English. Everything I thought they knew. They all seemed to know and understand me very well and to be completely familiar with my thoughts and my past. I didn't feel any desire to ask for someone I had known because they all knew me. No one could know me any better. It also didn't occur to me to try to identify them as uncle or grandfather. It was like going to a large gathering of relatives at Christmas and not being quite able to remember their names or who they are married to or how they are connected to you, but you do know that you are with your family. I don't know if they were related to me or not. It felt like they were closer to me than anyone I had ever known. Throughout my conversation with the luminous beings, which lasted for what seemed like a very long time, I was being physically supported by the being in whom I had been engulfed. We were in a sense completely stationary, yet hanging in space. Everywhere around us were countless radiant beings, like stars in the sky, coming and going. It was like a super magnified view of a galaxy super packed with stars. And in the giant radiance at the center, they were packed so densely together that individuals could not be identified. Their selves were in such harmony with the Creator that they were really just one. One of the reasons I was told that all the countless beings had to go back to their source was to become invigorated with this sense of harmony and oneness. Being apart for too long a time diminished them and made them feel separate. Their greatest pleasure was to go back to the source of all life. Our initial conversation involved them simply trying to comfort me. Something that disturbed me was that I was naked. Somewhere in the darkness I had lost my hospital gown. I was a human being. I had a body. They told me this was okay. They were quite familiar with my anatomy. Gradually I relaxed and stopped trying to cover my privates with my hands. That's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 begins, the life review of Howard Storm. The first sentence is, next they wanted to talk about my life. To my surprise, my life played out before me, maybe 6 or 8 feet in front of me, from beginning to end. Okay, I'm going to end there. This Howard Storm is kind of a very interesting one, because he went from being an atheist college professor to becoming an evangelical Christian. And he points out later that this friend that saved him from the hell-like pit was actually Jesus, and he's still alive, he's devoted the rest of his life to preaching about Jesus. Okay, and so I include this for 2 reasons. One is to make clear that this whole story of mine, this whole Neo-Swedenborgianism is not in any way anti-Christian or anti-any religion. Because there's another really good one, the rabbi, I always forget the rabbi's name, but he was a secular Israeli who converted, who's now an Orthodox rabbi. So he had a similar journey where he went from being a secular agnostic, where this guy is a secular atheist. This experience happened, and they dive in head first to their religion. And so I want to make clear that there's nothing anti-religious about what I'm saying. And I want to make clear that what I'm saying is actually a very simple thing. It started out where, as I've said before in the past, you get on these debate pages about these near-death experiences, and somebody says, well, it's all in their head. It's all in their head. And that's kind of the starting point of this, because I say, if it's all in their head, if this whole experience is in his head, then that makes it physiology. And that also makes it into something that we can all talk about, just like we can all talk about human physiology and human anatomy, regardless of your religious background. You get into, let's say, medical school, and you're studying anatomy and physiology, your religion is not really part of the conversation. And you can talk about anatomy and physiology with people of other faiths or people of no faith, because you're talking about a shared subject. All right, so there's nothing that I'm saying that's telling you to be religious or to not be religious. This is something separate than religion. This is a non religious look at religious experience.